Hello and welcome to Managing Frustration at Home. My name is Twania Manuelito, and I will be presenting today. Families during COVID. So we all know that parenting is hard. The prolonged pandemic crisis has made it even harder. Parents have been stretched thin, worries about finances, worrying about our family's health and our children's care and development. There's been a break in continuity of care and learning. School closures meant that children had to stay home while parents and caregivers juggled caretaking, supervision of play and learning, and potential telehealth work responsibilities. Unfortunately, not all parents had the option for telework. There's been a disruption in our children's daily life. Going back to families' health, the break in continuity of healthcare is another thing that families had to struggle with during the pandemic. Parents may have felt pressured to avoid seeking healthcare due to earlier stay-at-home orders and may continue to do so because they may be afraid of getting sick with COVID. However, all child well visits and immunizations are important to maintain the health of our children. Similarly, community resource closures have impacted our children's ability to receive other therapeutic services like speech and occupational services. Disruption in our children's daily life. Our kids had a routine of waking up in the morning, getting ready for school, getting on the bus, and attending school. Our brains are organized in repeated patterns. At an early age, when the sun comes up, it means it's morning. When the sun goes down, it is nighttime. We don't necessarily worry about it unless there is a change that we notice. Our brain says, hey, something isn't right. Structure reduces anxiety. So when there is less predictability, anxiety and other mental reactions are likely to flare up. Families during COVID had to be cooped up. Some had to be quarantined, and the tensions in the household may have been running a bit higher, which leads to becoming frustrated and annoyed with family members. Families during COVID, of course, feeling very overwhelmed, maybe losing our temper a little bit easier, arguing or behaving rudely. Fatigue makes us feel irritable, withdrawn, and aggressive. So we may be a little bit more snappier on the edge when that's not our intention, but because we've had to deal with this, it just makes us a little bit more short-tempered. And these conflicts can make tensions even worse if it's not resolved or managed. Families during COVID, miss significant life events. Physical distancing has made us feel as if our family's life is on hold. The truth is that the clock keeps ticking. Birthdays, vacation plans, births, and funerals are just a few of the many significant life events that families have missed. Experiences during the pandemic, social distancing, stay-at-home orders, and limited gatherings have affected the ability of friends and family to come together in person to celebrate and or grieve in typical ways. When parents or caregivers experience grief, young children may also experience emotional challenges, so it's important to have honest conversations with children about grief as a normal response to losing someone or something important to us. And loss of security and safety. Being safe and feeling safe are essential for young children. The household income of many families with young children has been affected during the pandemic due to job loss and lost wages. Economic insecurity is linked to adverse childhood experiences that can negatively impact their social, emotional development, learning, and health. Young children living in families that are experiencing economic difficulties may feel unsafe. They may worry about when their next meal will come or whether the electricity may get shut off. They may have inconsistent access to healthy foods, safe transportation, and housing. Parents' growing economic stress can increase children's risk for exposure to violence. With increased time spent at home during COVID, some children may have been increasingly exposed to child abuse and neglect, maybe intimate partner violence at home and sexual violence. So it's important for parents to access social supports and services, including mental health services. Telemental health and national helplines may provide emergency options for emotional and mental health support during a crisis. So what can we do to create a more supportive environment for the whole family? Setting boundaries. What does it mean to set boundaries? Boundaries can be defined as the limits we set with other people, which indicate what we find acceptable and unacceptable in their behavior towards us. So, for example, verbal and emotional violations where we are being yelled at, maybe being judged, manipulated, made fun of, or shaming would be an unacceptable boundary. Physical space boundary is another type of boundary that can be set. It would be unacceptable for our personal belongings to be touched or moved without our knowledge or permission. An acceptable boundary is being entitled to our own feelings given a certain situation, as are others. One of the most common reasons for not setting boundaries is a fear of conflict. Nobody likes conflict. We don't want to upset or anger people. So we sacrifice our own needs and want to keep the peace. It's tempting to return to not doing anything about it when others don't like our boundaries, but really that does not help the relationship, because if we have a clear boundary defined and the person crosses the boundary, then it's important for us to be able to express to that person that the boundary was crossed and this is how it made me feel or made us feel. Creating structure, for example, is another way to create a more supportive environment for the whole family. Having set aside time for self-care, play, work, school, and other responsibilities. By pre-planning our current daily routines, we have some certainty, knowing when we'll wake up, what tasks we need to do right away to prepare for the day, and what activities are important to accomplish before, say, lunchtime. We may not know whether a loved one's health will improve, but we can be certain that every afternoon we take 10 minutes to refocus and do some deep belly breathing. We may not know how we will manage money in the coming weeks, but we can be certain that every night before bed, we'll think about what we are grateful for or send positive wishes to others who are struggling right now. Another thing that we can do is recognize our triggers, stress, fear, and addressing them. When adults in the household are worried or stressed, even young children birth to 2 years may experience emotional distress. Children ages 3 to 5 years might worry about getting sick with COVID or about their loved ones getting sick. Excessive worry or sadness, unhealthy eating or sleeping habits, and difficulty with attention and concentration are some signs of stress in young children. There are also signs of stress in adults, as well as worsening of chronic health problems or mental health conditions, and increased use of tobacco or alcohol and other substances. Adults should seek mental health services or spiritual guidance if they are experiencing worry and stress that interferes with caretaking, household duties, or their ability to work. Adults can take steps to provide stability and support to help children cope. Parents can support positive coping through play and talk about emotions. For instance, choosing a comfortable space on the floor in the living room at the child's level to talk about things that they are seeing adults do differently can provide the opportunity for children to express their fears in a safe place to help young children have some sense of control and safety in these circumstances. Parents can encourage conversations about being part of a community, such as protecting their family and their neighbors by standing 6 feet apart and wearing a mask. Have these changes become part of a fun and new family routine. Another thing we could do is notice our dysregulated feelings and give it a name. Dysregulated meaning if we're feeling anxious, that's a physiological response in our body that we're trying to regulate. Sometimes we might notice it as a rapid heartbeat, profusely sweating, trembling, shakiness, maybe even dizziness. And so when we're able to name how we're feeling, giving it a name, then we can do something about it. Engage in activities that you value. That could be anything that's important to you and your family. If physical health is important to your family, engage in those activities, running, soccer, volleyball. Pay attention to our tone of voice, language, facial expressions, and use of words. Tone of voice. When speaking with others, our tone clarifies and conveys meaning. So when we're texting, there's really no tonality in texting, and sometimes we can misinterpret or misrepresent what we're trying to get across to the other person. So going back to tone of voice, a phrase as simple as "I don't know" can be taken in a number of different ways depending on how you decide to express it. Your tone can not only affect how people perceive you, but also their willingness to listen to you. Use language that everyone can understand. For example, explaining things to our children in simple terms. Facial expressions can also convey a lot of meaning without saying anything. I know my 6-year-old is very good at this, and he calls me out on my facial expressions. If he notices that I look angry or annoyed without saying anything, and he's very good at this, I try to sort of talk my way out of it, but it doesn't work. And I have to explain to him, what I am feeling, so that way he doesn't think that it has anything to do with him. Validation. Validating each family member's feelings. Validation involves understanding and showing acceptance for another person's feelings. When people receive this emotional validation, they feel that their emotions are not only seen and heard by others, but that these feelings are also accepted. So we're not trying to tell them their feelings are wrong or right, or they're this or that. It's their own feelings, and however they choose to feel them and express them is entirely their right. Another thing that we can do is avoid taking a confrontational or critical tone, which can often lead to someone being defensive and shutting down. I think we can all see that we've experienced some harsh criticism, and our response to it may have been becoming defensive or shutting down, where we don't want to engage in the conversation because of how their approach was. Ask how a family member is feeling. What do they need, and what can you do to help them? Sometimes communication breaks down when we assume that we know how each family member is feeling or what they need, but really it could be something entirely different. Also ask what the family member thinks the problem is. Again, we could assume that we think we know what the problem is, but they may have their own perspective, their own interpretation of what they see the problem is. If the person or family member is having experiences that seem hard to understand or unusual, don't debate them. We just have to meet them where they're at, because if we're trying to argue our point across to them, they may just get more upset about the situation. Ask how these experiences are making them feel. Show concern, look them in the eye, and tell them that you support them. And avoid too much exposure to the news. I know we all want to be informed and stay informed, but sometimes that can get really overwhelming, especially with all of the media outlets we have today. There's Facebook, Instagram, CNN, our local channel news. It's a lot of information coming at once, and sometimes it almost seems like it gets increasingly more difficult to hear some of the things that are coming out. So try to avoid too much exposure to news. Set limits on the times of days, the times that you want to watch news, if it's just from one source. And again, with social media too. Find time to focus on play with our children and play with the family members. Enjoy the positive experiences together. to relieve some stress and frustration. Laughter is a good stress reliever. So watching a comedy, a cartoon, a family favorite, something just for you guys to be able to relate to one another in a stress-free environment where you guys just are focusing on that time, spending time with our children, doing interactive activities that you guys both enjoy. Again, if your family is into physical fitness, going outside, kicking the soccer ball, shooting your bows and arrows, playing basketball, baseball, there are a lot of things that we can do outside with our children, or we can read to them, craft, or do dancing. Having a little dance party in your living room could be a fun way to interact with each other. Be sure to give each family member time so they feel valued and loved. I know this is hard as a mother for myself. With my 3 boys and my husband, I try to equally distribute my time between all 4 of them because they're all equally important to me. And so I want to make sure that they do feel valued and that I do show my love towards them. Setting aside worries and work responsibilities, easier said than done, but it can be done. We have to prioritize and be intentional with our time. If we're worrying about something and we're not able to focus on play with our children, write the worries down on a piece of paper and then come back to it later. Write down your work responsibilities and get back to it later, because the time we spend with our children and our families is time that we may never get back, because we can't go back and make up for lost time, and we can't go to the future to set aside. We can't look to the future to know how we're going to do, how much time we're going to have. So it's okay to give ourselves a break as well. It's okay to give ourselves a break. This is especially hard for a lot of people because we take care of a lot of people. They depend on us. They depend on us to provide for them, and finding that time for ourselves to just unwind and relax makes us feel guilty, but it's okay to give ourselves a break. We need it. We need to be able to refill our cup, because we cannot pour from an empty cup. Perspective taking. Keeping others' perspectives in mind can help us be more patient and create solutions to conflict. It's also called empathy, being able to put ourselves in another person's shoe to see how they're feeling, see where they're coming from. So that way it's not just one-sided and we're trying to, again, argue our point to the other person. We're trying to be open-minded and be flexible in our thinking. Parents can step out of parenting into their job or relationship, but children can't step out of needing care. It's our job to be able to model behavior for them. Parents have the cognition and the ability to make the separation. Sometimes it's a little bit hard for us because sometimes we're always on the go. So like we go to work, home, and if our kids are in extracurricular activities, then it's like go, go, go. So we have to be able to make those transitions and modeling that for our children as well. And remember, as parents, we don't always show up as our best selves. Neither will our children, but we try. It's important to always try and make that effort, because our children are worth it. We don't always, not every day is going to be a good day, and that's okay. It's okay. It's about making the moments count and knowing that we can always correct our behaviors and learn new ways and manage our behaviors and our emotions. Having empathy for ourselves is key to this as well. That goes along with giving ourselves a break, cutting ourselves some slack for our imperfections, as well as our children, because nobody's perfect. Managing anger during conflict. Conflict can't always be avoided, Practicing mindfulness can help us regulate our angry feelings. Mindfulness being deep belly breathing. Mindfulness can be body scan, where you're sitting and paying attention to the different muscles in your body while your eyes are closed and you are breathing. There are a lot of different mindfulness techniques that can help us regulate our all of our emotions and our feelings. Calming ourselves during conflict, stepping away from the situation temporarily if we have to, finding support from a partner, a friend, or another family member. Discuss and validate children's feelings if they are having a difficult time managing their anger. It's important for us to recognize our children's feelings so that way they do feel heard and they're not resorting to other outlets. Teaching our children how to express their feelings with words. Maintaining strong relationships after conflict is equally important, because if conflict isn't addressed and if it's ignored, it keeps popping up time and time again, which builds resentment and mistrust. For example, if we confided in a family member or a friend and about something really personal to us, and then we had an argument, they throw that personal information that we told them, that we trusted them with, back in our face to make us seem like it was somehow our fault. And that type of behavior builds resentment and mistrust. I'm not going to trust this person anymore because this is what they did to me in the past. Conflict doesn't always have to be a negative experience because we learn something from it. Conflict is how we find solutions, coming to the table with solutions. It doesn't always have to be this big brawling negative fight, because we can all learn how to manage our conflict by regulating our emotions and our feelings. Opportunity to communicate our feelings and learn better ways to support each other is helpful in maintaining strong relationships after conflict, because when we resolve conflict, we build even stronger relationships. And it's also modeling accountability for our children, knowing that if we had a conflict or an argument with our spouse or a family member, that we're not going to hold a grudge forever, that it was just temporary. It was an argument. It was something we disagreed on, but that doesn't mean that we're not family anymore. That doesn't mean that we still can't communicate and talk and be a family. It's modeling accountability, taking responsibility for our own feelings and actions and behaviors, so that way our children can learn to do that as well when they have conflict with other children or siblings. Living a healthy lifestyle isn't easy, but it can be achieved by gradually making small changes and building on those successes. So that is all of my presentation for managing frustrations at home. If you have any questions or comments, you may contact me at the Laguna Early Division of Education. My telephone number is 505-552-6544, extension 5103, or you may email me with any questions or comments at T as in Tom .Manuelito, MANUELITO at lagunaed.net. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation. Be well.